It's a massacre.
The United Nations are here now.
1, 2, 3. What's your reason for your trip?
They are republishing my first book.
Are you a writer?
Yes and no.
Hello and welcome to our film show. This week marks a tragic anniversary for the people of Rwanda as the country remembers the victims of the genocide that saw close to 1 million people killed 30 years ago. In 1994, ethnic tensions spiraled, resulting in the massacre of hundreds of thousands of Tutsis. These harrowing events were relayed on the nightly news on television screens around the world, but they've also been documented in cinema too. Lisa Nesselson joins us as always. Lisa, tell us a bit more about those films.
Well, Hollywood mounted a major film just 10 years after the massacres, the Oscar-nominated Hotel Rwanda, directed by Terry George and starring Don Cheadle. It purported to tell a fact-inspired story of how the manager of a luxury hotel in Kigali saved over 1,000 of his fellow citizens from certain death. Take a look.
You are a good man, Paul. We need to help one another. That is the only thing that is keeping us alive.
So we see Don Cheadle there playing Paul Rusesabagina, a Hutu man married to a Tutsi woman in that hotel that becomes the focal point during that conflict. Tell us more about the film.
Well, unfortunately, since there's a lot more to it, what a lot of people in the global north know or think they know about the Rwandan genocide probably comes from that well-made film. To much of the outside world, Paul Rusesabagina is a hero who saved 1,200 people from genocide in events depicted in the film. But he was involved in later years in controversy because critics said he profited from the victims' misery and was rewriting Rwanda's history for his own gain. He was also in prison in Rwanda for some time for terrorism charges. He's a fierce critic of the government there.
And he is free now. Well, other European filmmakers have made affecting films centred on Rwanda and that awful time in history.
In 2009, Belgian cinematographer Philippe Van Loof made The Day God Walked Away. A young Tutsi woman is reduced to hiding in the attic of the Belgian family she works for when the violence erupts. After discovering the horrific fate of her own family, she is thrown into pure survival mode without the luxury of grieving. It's an intimate, not easily forgotten approach to large-scale horror distilled into the struggles of one character. In 2019, Notre Dame du Nil, Our Lady of the Nile, addressed the insidiousness of how hatred of Tutsis took hold. Based on a best-selling novel by Franco-Rwandan author Scholastique Bukasonga, it looks at history through the eyes of the girls at an exclusive Belgian-run Catholic boarding school in 1973. Take a look.
Vous mangez pas?
On doit attendre.
Pourquoi?
C'est Gloriosa. Elle ne veut plus ouvrir la bouche devant les Tutsis.
Now, here in Paris, the Memorial of the Shoah, the Holocaust Museum, has an exhibition called Rwanda 1994, the genocide of the Tutsis. And there's half a dozen documentaries being screened there, the panel discussions, conferences over the course of the next few months.
Well, the watchwords after the unspeakable atrocities of the Holocaust were simple and important. Never again. But human prejudice and stupidity seem to go in cycles. There's a sad but powerful bond between populations that share the ineffable horrors of genocide. On June 2nd, at the memorial, they will read out loud the names of every person known to have perished in the Rwandan genocide, much like the ritual each year of reading the names of the victims of the Shoah in World War II.
Indeed, important moment to commemorate those victims here in Paris. Well, now to a different account of survival. The film Asphalt City premiered in Cannes almost a year ago under the title Black Flies. It was inspired by a book describing the conditions for ambulance drivers in Harlem in the 1990s during the crack epidemic there. Let's take a look.
I know what you're thinking. Is it worth it?
It's the job. I did what I thought was right.
You ain't got what it takes for this life here.
You start doing this because you want to help people.
Let's go, let's get a life here.
Sometimes you just end up doing the complete opposite.
So this film was made by French director Jean-Stéphane Silver. He's been living in Brooklyn in the US since 2009, and he wanted to transpose the book's themes to the present day.
Yes. Silver's film debut, Johnny Mad Dog, about child soldiers in Liberia, was visceral and impressive. This is visceral, all right, but ultimately more annoying than involving. Ty Sheridan plays Ollie Cross, a medical student who is new to the job of emergency ambulance work. For inexplicable reasons, he looks up to hard-boiled partner Gene Ratovsky, played by Sean Penn. Together in an environment of violence and unrelenting stress, they save the lives of individuals who might best be described as human scum, thugs, drug dealers, pimps. It's icky work, but apparently somebody has to do it.
Okay, well, indeed, France 24's Eve Jackson got a chance to sit down with Ty Sheridan during the Cannes Film Festival, where he explained what drew him to the role.
And I knew we would see New York in a way that maybe we hadn't seen much in cinema, so that was exciting. It was also, I think, it's a bit of a commentary on, you know, these medics and what the weight that they carry. They're surrounded by people that are sick and dying. A lot of them have to work double shifts, sometimes triple, just to make ends meet. I think maybe we don't have as much respect as we should for these first responders.
Now, presumably, people go into emergency and humanitarian work because they want to be of service to help people, not because they want to be exposed to the very worst of what humans can do to themselves and each other. There are experiences you just can't shrug off at the end of the day. There's a real verve to the filmmaking. I'll admit that almost a year after I saw it, many scenes remain fresh in my mind. But I got nothing out of observing these hardworking men buried in the human flotsam and jetsam of a violent, unforgiving city. As a surface, as an aesthetic building material, Asphalt is hard, but for these characters damaged by the cumulative distress of their job, life is harder. And watching their distress makes for a long haul as viewers.
Okay, so a noble subject, but quite difficult to watch. Well, next to a film out this week in France, co-starring Isabelle Huppert. This is a sweetly modest tale about a French woman at a loose end who undergoes a personal transformation on a trip to Japan.
Sidonie in Japan is the third feature film by Elise Girard. It's the slightly burlesque, pleasingly flighty tale of a French author, Sidonie, played by Huppert, who travels from Paris to Japan for a book tour. Her Japanese publisher, the amusingly named Kenzo Mizuguchi, meets her at the airport. He speaks French, having spent time in Paris in his youth, and anyone who struggled to learn French will appreciate his halting but precise delivery and the way he remains very Japanese while trying to allow for French attitudes toward life and literature. Sidonie gradually learns that her books mean a lot to Japanese readers. Oh yes, she ends up having several encounters with her husband, even though he has been dead for several years.
Curious. Well, let's get a feel for the tone of Sidonie in Japan.
Qui êtes-vous?
Au Japon, ils vivent partout dos de nu.
Antoine, mais c'est vraiment toi.
Sidonie.
Vous croyez aux fantômes?
Pourquoi tu es revenu?
Je suis pas revenu. Je suis jamais parti, Sidonie.
L'écriture, c'est ce qui reste quand on se retrouve sans rien. Je sais pas ce qui m'arrive.
Ne pleurez pas, Sidonie-san.
Je suis heureuse de vous connaître.
Moi aussi.
Elise Girard is very adept at incorporating fanciful off-kilter elements into situations that start out as straightforward. The lure of Japan has been a touchstone since her fiction debut, Belleville, Tokyo, and literature looms large in this and her previous film, Drôle d'oiseau, set mostly in the Latin Quarter and co-starring Huppert's daughter, Lolita Shama. There are people who are convinced that there are few roles in the movies for women over 70. That's actually far from the truth here in France, where an array of actresses in their 70s and 80s frequently appear on the big screen. But if it were true, we could joke that that's because ultra-prolific Isabelle Huppert, age 71, monopolizes those parts. And I hope she keeps acting for as long as the cherry trees blossom in Japan.
There's absolutely no talk of her retiring anytime soon, so that's probably guaranteed. Well, finally, here in Paris, the Cinémathèque Française is hosting a retrospective of films about cross-dressing and transvestite characters. Now, in the US at the moment, there's a great deal of debate about whether drag is harmful to young people. What about these movies? What do they have to tell us?
Everybody knows. Some like it hot. Tutsi, Mrs. Doubtfire, The Birdcage, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. But there have been instances of men dressing up as women since movies began, and women dressing up as men, too, as in Victor Victoria. No less a personage than the late Queen Elizabeth was a fan of cross-dressing comic Dame Edna. But the very idea of drag has gone from harmless to a harbinger of the end of the world, if you believe alarmists like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. I grew up watching a successful black comedian named Flip Wilson on The Ed Sullivan Show, watched by tens of millions of Americans, squeezed into a red dress as a sassy woman whose explanation for things was a high-pitched, "The devil made me do it." So far as I know, it was understood that this was a venerable form of theater, that it was fun to watch, and no children would be harmed. In that way, my wacky nation has taken a step backwards in high heels. I say if you have kids, take them to some of these cross-dressing classics.
Well, they can also get a bit of cinema history as well as some sequins. Thank you very much for that roundup this week, Lisa. We'll leave you with a medley of wardrobe adjustments which bring humour and some deep feelings too. Otherwise, remember to check out our website and our social media for more movies, arts and culture. There's more news coming up just after this.
Ce n'est pas parce que nous jouons une revue de travesti qu'il n'y a pas une situation dramatique, mon petit gars. Faut comprendre les choses.
I'm a man. Well, nobody's perfect.